Africa. And I have also been training media personality, journalists on how to report accurately on science. And now I'm freelancer with a number of specialized magazines such as SciDevNet, based in London, and also Nature Publishing Group, which is focusing on reporting on how science journals are being covered across several African universities. So briefly, that's my presentation. So if you allow me to proceed with my presentation, may I, let me check. Yes, okay, got it. 1 second, I'm trying to share my presentation. So the topic of my presentation, can you see my screen?
Not yet, I cannot see that.
Okay,
try again.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm trying to adapt. Just some moments. Okay.
Cannot see that. Not yet.
No. How about now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. So as I said, just put it. So the topic of my presentation, as I said, 1 second. Okay, the topic of my presentation, as I said, is focusing on why public communication matters to increase scientific impact. So it's important because, you know, this session is kind of knowledge sharing. It's not about training people, it's just about sharing with scientists on how better to communicate science. So the focus of my presentation is to explore a range of ways of engaging members of the public with the design, conduct, and disseminating of research. The major purpose of this is about creating and generating mutual benefit by enhancing the quality of impact of research with the major focus on health-related issues. So before I start my presentation, it is key to highlight the importance of public engagement. So next, okay. The highlight of my presentation, I will present on the value of science communication within and outside of academia. Because we are when we talk about science, conveying science information to the public, it's outside of academia. Also, there are some general rules on how to communicate science. Also, science communication, I will just go with some key example. In Africa, using Rwanda as a case study. And also I will be highlighting why science, be talking on why communication science is important. The science of science communication, because the science of science communication is also another science. So the key topic, or the key focus of my presentation also will be some practical exercise on how using data and the statistic in a meaningful way. And what are those sources of data for health? We need also to define what are those sources. So before as I said, it's in what we encourage people to think actively about science and understand it's relevant to them in their daily life. That's the key for why we need to convey science to the public. So as I said, science communication is part of scientists' everyday lives. So scientists must give talk, write papers, and propose. I'm sure most of you scientists, you are publishing papers, you are sharing peer review journal, you are publishing in peer review journal, but you need to communicate with a variety of audience, not only between scientists. You need to communicate to public. Also, you need to educate them. So effective science communication means transmitting your message clearly and concisely so that it is understood. So that's why I said when scientists communicate more effectively, those science thrive. So what's the importance then? Well, the importance now is why conveying science to the public. The first important is that can facilitate the link between knowledge and action, like the way you are organizing this session. We need just to link knowledge and action. If the science, how do the public interpret? How can you convey informed to be having an action on the ground. Also need to inform and empower the audience to produce change. For example, we'll take some practical example with Rwanda case, with the case on Rwanda. Also, the other importance that it leads to enhanced scientific understanding, which can also lead to paradigm shifts. Because, you know, when scientists get feedback on what they are doing, this can also lead to paradigm shifts. So, most importantly, as I said, because we take as some practicals using data to communicate science. Communicating results is a significant part of doing science. So why communicate science? The most important part of this presentation is to identify some challenge, because, you know, convincing people that scientific evidence has merit and should guide their behavior, it's still the greatest science communication challenge. So we need to overcome this challenge. That's why we are organizing this knowledge challenge. Another key point is when it comes to scientific works, which is very key to this presentation. There is so-called the quantitative research is more preferred than over qualitative research. I know because we have been experiencing a number of research institutions almost focusing on quantitative research over qualitative research, because of course as ethical are obliging this scientific, they are most focused. It is more scientific, objective, fast and focused and acceptable. Sometimes qualitative research is not being considered by scientists. We also see that. So but there is one of the main reasons many researchers are primarily interested in collecting numerical data, which means, for example, when you talk about COVID-19, when you talk about HIV infection, when you talk about sexual and reproductive health, you are especially concerned with counting social phenomena, like, as I said, HIV prevalence, like saying it's 3% among the general population. That's enough for researchers. But a qualitative study also could explore other findings beyond that. That's also important in science communication. Like, for example, when you go for science communication, when you go for qualitative, for example, there is a way you can just, when communicate with qualitative, there is a way we engage public. We need to know exactly what is most important, because we are not communicating research just to other research or we are communicating research to look for public engagement. So as you can see on my screen, I try to establish comparison between the two, because when you communicate the main way that scientific says, the peer review, as I said earlier in my presentation. So when you compare to this, when now communicating to the public, it's changed now. You need to explain what you are doing, and what you are explaining to the audience who is more like to support science. That's very, very important. So you are releasing and publishing their findings. They are trying to increase the visibility of the research institution. When you talk about research, of course, they are coming from different university research institutions. So they are trying somehow to increase the visibility of their institution. Like the author had reviewed. Of course, I know, for example, getting promoted to the rank of professor or so on, just their performance expectation and the reward system at the institution. But for now, communicating for public, advanced public understanding, do and what they can discover. That's the impact. You need to show the public how they can rely on the science results just to change, to improve their livelihoods. That's the impact of science. Why? Whenever you try to engage public, to engage the public, you need to consider all these aspects. How research has been. As you are researchers, you are trying to see, for example, how many other peer review have used for my research. That's simply different from how to communicate public. When communicating public, you need to explain your science to just anyone in a way just that's accessible. Let's just make it simple and make it in a simple way that just public can understand and replicate the same. How can the public replicate that? If you are writing an article for a journal, or that's only scientists will read your research, you can probably be more technical and know to explain each time. But when you're talking to the general public, you want to use the language that they'll be more familiar with. For example, I will give you some example, practical example in my presentation. So how to communicate then? The most important, that's general rules. The one of the rules, you just know your audience. You need to serve your audience. What does the audience want to know? You need to ask yourself, if I am having to get this message across to the audience, what the audience want to know exactly from my research. You need just to share, because the most important, you are not sharing it, you're also sharing knowledge, because you need to tailor your communication based on the group of interest. For example, you are talking to farmers, you are getting across. When you are getting to women group, when you are talking to youth, you need to know as a researcher for health. For example, if you are communicating on sexual and reproductive health, you need just to make sure that the communication based on the group interests. When now writing, you not write the same way you are writing in a scientific journals. You write in an explanatory manner without dumping down. You start with the most important information. As I said, I have been trying to establish comparison between how scientific works, how scientific journals should appear, and how public and media and business stakeholders observe information in the opposite order. When you communicate, for example, scientific and medical communities, just you provide background, methods, result, and conclusion. That's the way you communicate when you publish in a scientific journal. But when it comes to, now it's opposite, as I said. It's now you start conclusion. What kind of message I need to get to convey to the general audience? What has been the impact? You start now with the conclusion. Now, when you talk about the conclusion, that can attract interests of the public, your audience. That can draw interest for your audience. Now you proceed with the results, and you end up with the method, and then you go further by adding some background. For example, you are talking, as I say, we talk about COVID-19. Now it's one of the topic making headlines. You need to start exact conclusion. What's the new finding, for example? For example, a new research found out that vaccine may be AstraZeneca. That's not my real conclusion, but I'm trying just to give some example. You start by what was the conclusion, then the result, then give some background. What AstraZeneca is about. You need to explain all of that. Also, you need to know as a scientist, because as a scientist, you need to know your subject. You don't have and can't give, just you have already, you master your research. You master the issue, but you need to translate, because but the focus, because my colleagues here will also present on how to translate complex jargon for the average, but I not comment much on this. But as a scientist, you need to master your subject. Okay, before proceeding to the next slide, as I said, there are many ways scientists, common ways scientists are communicating the result of their research. One of them is publishing the journals, as I said, and you can also present your results at a conference, at conferences. You can present at university, or also you can publish an article in mainstream media. I used to see some scientists, for example, in the Rwandan case, we can see some mainstream media. We have like the New Times publication, we have Kitty Press, but we are no longer seeing many paper published by scientists, because yet it is allowed for the scientists to write what can this article have as an impact to the general audience. That's something that's another way for communicating results. So as I proceed with another key point is when it comes to scientific works, as I said earlier, is just you are focusing on quantitative research, but qualitative study can also go beyond. You can explain, but I think because we are now living social media, people are using social media, there are numbers. We talked about conference, but scientists also can leverage on like social media platforms. Those social media now, we need to consider that because there are misconceptions of how people are getting, how the message getting to, how you can get across your message to the audience, because there's some misconception, like misinformation. That's very important for the scientific community to know exactly what's about. When you talk about misinformation, it's something misreading information. I remember sometimes back when people were sharing some information about COVID-19 vaccine, coronavirus vaccine, just people were trying to spread rumor, creating fears among the people, just regardless of whether there is intent to deceive. Just when that's called misinformation. Now there is disinformation, because we are experiencing now there is competition between countries, between different powers, countries that trying to misleading information. It's just created just intent or to deceive people. Just don't go and get COVID vaccine, because this is not really good. But misinformation can be difficult to address in the public sphere because it requires the source of information to be trusted. Now, whenever you publish, you need to just convince people with your source of information. But even when a scientific source of information is trusted now, because as I said, my presentation, how to convey trusted information to the general public. There is a risk it will never reach its intended audience. For example, like they have been reading like some people we are experiencing. That's something we are experiencing today, not only in Rwanda, in rural areas. We are seeing that's an article, even on TV interviews about the necessity of COVID-19 vaccine. But this leave comments expressing outrage that doctor are trying to find, or doctor or government are trying, or NGO or other partners, health officials are trying to further a pro-vaccine agenda, that which is not true. That's some examples, just disinformation. That's misleading information. So the science communication, as I said, when we talk about science communication, because as a scientist, you are communicating in a way just in a user-friendly area. There is a user-friendly coverage on how you can use statistics, for example, how you can interpret these data. For example, as I said, qualitative is not mostly being used by scientists. Qualitative study. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Can hear you.
Qualitative study can just explore other findings. I gave you an example of like HIV/AIDS. But beyond that, for example, there are like HIV-related stigma and discrimination. We can also communicate when we try to engage the public by explaining how the stigma and discrimination, this can contribute to behavior change in one way or another. That's one of the most important. Scientific could not only communicating quantitative data, they could also communicating qualitative studies or their findings, because we know there are a number of studies that have been conducted by a number of NGOs, research institutions, but they should also get across. How can we get across all this message? Just this implied a detailed description of experience of the participant. For example, if you are talking about HIV-related stigma, that's an example in Rwanda. We can just description of experience of the participant living with HIV. In this particular case, compared to quantitative data, we use just non-numerical data and non-statistics. It's like some kind of semi-structured data that are not necessary, saying we need like a HIV infection is 3%. But you can just pick this message and get it how to convey to the public using the method mentioned above. But researcher can be on that, can take to disseminate in an engaging way, to increase the impact of intuition is the main goal of science communication is to, yes, when you present fact now, you are presenting figures, but you're also trying to analyze. That's also called qualitative data. That's why. But scientists are not trusted by some individuals, of course, that's it. You need to build to rest mechanisms. Because when you communicate science, some people will just challenge, oh no, that's not really something we are experiencing. But you identify what the audience, target group, So what the step now to communicate science? The first step to explore and exploit multimedia opportunity. You can use text, you can use photo, you can use video, you can use graphic, infographic. That's very, very important to scientific research. Because when you in reality, that's one just knowing facts. That's necessary when communicating facts, figures. It doesn't grant opinion and behavior change will really be considered, because people, and you need to make sure that whenever you communicate, the behavior will be consistent, behavior will change. Otherwise, if you are just communicating fact figures, we're just using like infographic. You need to use photo. You need reading where you can just cover development, health issues. We agree to deal more authority, depth, and insights. That's very important. When you provide insight, you just to compare what is happening on the ground, just not reflecting just figures, tables, and communicating on saying 30% the rate of infection, HIV infection is on 3% among the general public. That's the general public will not really get the clear message out of your finding. You need to go beyond and try to go and you stay informed by discovering new and relevant data, fact and idea, of course, fresh perspective and conflicting argument. That's why one of the reasons I was giving you an example of qualitative research. That's the way you are trying now to explore new perspective around that particular quantitative data. So by casting one reading net widely, you also broaden your source. So as far as you need also to encourage participation. How you need to encourage engaging with others to participate and collaborate. When you are publishing scientific, you need to make sure that who else has done the similar work like the minor work. What others have done so far regarding the similar scientific finding have done. You need to also find the right tools, because as I said, I will be having another presentation here by Mr. Julius. We will be presenting with some tools just to disseminate, started to communicate science. That's something that's also important. You also need to limit traditional output. That's another very important aspect of science communication. So by giving traditional output like a research article, book with accompanying summaries, press release, blog, visual, video, you can just make a multimedia item that can really make public understand what you are doing. Also, you need to map your audience. You need to frame your audience and bring this together into a communication plan and what you will be releasing. That's one important. Whenever you come up with a press release, blog, visual, video, infographic, book, all of them, you need just to define what's your communication plan. Who is my audience? That's the general public. They need to know exactly what conclusion, what the results. You remember, you need to respect these pyramids. The inverted, in the way you communicate is different from the way you communicate science to other peers. It's different from the way you communicate science to the public. Now it will become inverted pyramid. You start what's new. The new is just the result of your file. That you need to know exactly about talking about scientific process whenever you explain, because you need to convince the audience. How can I trust if this research is real? If research is real, it's not really some fake news as some people used to explain that way. So scientific often interact. You need to interact with the public face to face to discuss science. That's why one of the reasons I say there are a number of platforms like conference. Public, you can just interact. You need to interact face to face to discuss science. Member of the public, that's because the member of the public are sometimes allowed to attend something, to listen to researcher talk. So whenever you are talking in a big conference, you need to make sure that the message is you are getting across the message. What you need to inform the public. You need also to visit the center at the poster presentation is to know exactly what they are doing. So, how about the data now? When we talk about communicating science using data, that's another key important aspect. the way you're using data, the key to this is just narrative. Choose the narrative. The narrative. It offer increased comprehension, interest, and engagement. Sometimes, researchers use statistics as objective and objective truth, but as proof of a point or support for a conclusion. But statistics come from study conducted, and one has to assess the validity of each one. You remember sometimes back, people were contesting, HIV infection is not really 3% among the general population because we are experiencing a number of people infected with living with HIV. That's not true. You need just to use statistics proof just to support your conclusion. Who conducted empathy for the study? That's very important also to highlight because you are experiencing a number of research who can just providing funding just for conducting a research. What did this set out to measure? That's thing people to, because the audience are really considering information as truthworthy when they can identify where the source came from. If it was like a survey or where were the respondents, for example, if you are conducting surveys, for example, like as your highest research, we are having like this health survey, which is conducted every 5 years. So if you are now conducting, you need to this unofficial document statistic. So you need to also provide who were the respondents, how were they questioned. So you need to also mention these are some sources of data we can just rely on, just compare if these really are accurate, because you need to make sure that whatever we are communicating data, we are communicating to the data we are engaging the public using this data. We are just getting across all those sources of data, like National Bureau of Statistics, like demographic and health surveys, as said earlier, and the World Bank, World Health Organization, also universities. Because from my experience, we have been seeing a number of research but they are not really relying on what academia are doing to communicate what kind of data are available on this particular subject. Let me say, like, let's talk about the productive health, COVID-19, because there are a number of studies being conducted even now. We need to rely on those sources. Oh, sorry. Okay, I mean, this was these sources. Okay, so in a meaningful way. Now, source of data. Now, as we move on with my presentation now, the next slide, if the data are interesting to you, they will also be interesting to others. So that's one of the reasons when it comes to effective science communication, the sharing of science-related knowledge. You are just sharing knowledge. You are not only communicating. What the impact? Because the impact is key for science, for you, scientific communication, for you finding. What you need to communicate, what will have as an impact. The intended outcome of science communication activity for the media, educating, inform, entertain audience also. Can even entertain, stimulating scientific to share their experience with others. Because if you are not sharing your experience, that's also another challenge. So citizen scientists can also play a role in everything from data collection. Like, for example, count from private clinics to data analysis, mapping households. That's one of the citizen scientists can help in one way to just communicate science effectively. For example, you can use like the infographic, mapping households, mapping clinic in Rwanda, local private clinic in Rwanda. Just this can help mapping households, just facilitate around them. These people, if people can just read, see, or can view and can see an infographic, just read something like infographic, illustrating health facilities around that particular. It helps him to know exactly how the science communication is. When you talk about science, depending on the audience that you want to reach with science, you just need to also consider that ordinary people bear the brunt of the impact of the government decision, and then suffer most from deprivation arising from misplaced public and expenditure. We are having government, there are a number of policies. But at the same time, because my presentation, the topic of my presentation was how to communicate to the public. But you also, at the same time, when you communicate to the public, you are influencing the policy, and you are influencing the science, is influencing someone at policy making level. That's also important. So you need also to focus on ordinary people. You need to know research should reach or who may benefit. If you are conducting, for example, like a research on reproductive, as I said, sexual and reproductive health, I'd focus, for example, on youth, on women, on some other target group, young people. This should reach, or those are the ones who benefit from your research. It's also important to respect inclusion. Respecting inclusion in scientific dissemination by creating messages which reflect gender, demography, etc. That's very important. Or those people living with the disability. That's also something very, very important. Okay, so come back to why if your data, why they will be interesting sharing science. That's I have already mentioned that. But more to my presentation is to know exactly. Okay, so apart from that, I think that's all I have to come. But the key message they recommend as a recommendation is just there is a way, a user-friendly coverage on how to use to convey scientific message and how public can capture what is out of this presentation. You need to put data, that's very important, into visual format. So this part, putting data into visual, can facilitating getting the scientific message across, taking human nature into account. Of course, we need to take human nature into account. We need to consider who will get the message. If I am talking about data, who will interpret this message? Who is the intended destination? That's a very important. Okay, another important point before I close my wind up with my, is about engaging member of the public. The focus is creating generative mutual benefit. There is qualitative economic impact with the major focus on health-related issues. We need to communicate. We need to make sure that research is reaching to intended beneficiaries, not just publishing, getting that's all. So I think with your permission, this way, I thank you so much. Can proceed and Mr. Moderator.
Thank you for the good presentation. Would like to call Mr. Julius to please allow you can authority will take away. Julius around.
Yes, I'm around. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, yeah, can hear you now. Can take a lead.
All right, thank you very much. Let me see if I can project my presentation here. Give me a second. Are you guys able to see my presentation?
Yes, we are.
All right, thank you so much. Once again, my apologies, I didn't start with you. I had, some urgent work I had to travel. But quickly, the presentation, I think what Emabre shared I think is a kind of foundation, or it draws a very good beginning to what science communicators really need. What I'm going to show is pretty much a general picture of the tools that science communicators really need to translate complex science information. And as probably Amabile talked about it, there are always simple rules. And here, the first rule really in science communication is to know your audience. Know your audience. That's something that you need to focus on before you even start thinking about communication itself. And then what this means is basically to be aware of, what your intended readers care about, and then write in a way that appeals to those motivations. But that might be a little bit naughty if you cannot reach your audience. And so here we're thinking about, most of the times when we read what scientists really write or publish, we ask ourselves, why is it that scientists do not even care about what they're talking about? That's the first thing, because if somebody takes a scientific concept and takes it out there, something that is complex, you start asking yourself, do these people actually really want to achieve anything from what they're going to publish or what they're trying to publish? And so the biggest question here is, why do some scientists really pretend like we know what you're talking about, or probably don't even care about what you're publishing? Well, maybe you may care about what you're publishing, but if you don't really care about communicating it effectively, I don't think you really stand to gain a lot from your work, or even meeting the goals you have when you're publishing your work. And so know your audience. So who's your audience? The simple reason why you should understand your audience here is because it determines whether what you're going to write about, people really care about it. It defines either who will want to see your work, who read your work, who want to associate, with your work, and even the kind of impact that, it will make, because that's what people are looking for at the end of the day. So, for example, let me take an example here. DNA, this is a simple sentence. DNA replicates itself prior to entering mitosis. So when you look at this word, it's this is a sentence of 5 words, but how bad could it be? Let's take an example of someone probably who went to high school, got a good education, and probably studied well in biology. That person is, to some extent, to understand or even remember what some of the elements of this sentence means. Maybe he'll remember that DNA is the code of life. He'll remember that to replicate means to make a copy. He'll probably remember that prior 2 minutes before. He'll remember that mitosis is when cells divide. But imagine someone who doesn't know one or more of these things, which is why we say that knowing your audience before you start planning your communication is, really, 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 really important. So it can help you set the tone, the reading level, and even the engagement which is necessary for a communication. And this is something that you need to remember. It is important to realize that even things that you scientists think are very simple, sometimes they may be complex to other people, and it is something that you should always bear in mind when you're going to publish your work. And so who are your audience? I've tried to break down the audience in no particular order, in probably 3 to 4 segments. One, I've highlighted the general public. The general public here, we're talking about basically ordinary people. The general public cares about what impact science events have on them. You know, let's say if there's a new invention, you know, regarding COVID-19, for instance, other people do not want to understand what's going on, you know, what is the invention about. They want to understand what impact is this even going to have on me, or, you know, on my life. So it is critical to use as simple language as possible, you know, a language that any layman can understand, pretty much the way you would explain to your grandmother or your sister who's in the village who has never went to school. So that's the general public. The second segment is the policymakers. Policymakers, here you're looking at people like maybe ministers, politicians, basically. You're looking at people in who even influence policy making, maybe civil society organizations, because these are the groups of people who reach to masses and they consume information more than we think they do. So it is therefore critical for scientists or science communicators to always include these segments of our communities when they're planning their communication. And so how do you reach out to them? It could either be via emails, could be newsletters, it could be social media. You could even engage them on a personal basis through conferences and so on. But this is a segment that really reach to the masses. And the next segment is the business people. Maybe let's imagine your research is targeting the investor community, you know. Probably you're an economist who's trying to publish a new research on monetary or fiscal stimulus checks, for instance, or any economic concept. How do you reach out to the business or to the investor communities, you know? Then you really need to understand that the terms and the language you're going to use when you're communicating to such kind of people is really different from the same language that you will use when you're talking to the ordinary people, probably your mom or your dad, you know. And the way you communicate to them really determines to what extent the work you're trying to put out there is going to make an influence, you know. And I think the last segment is the audience, which I think most of you, the science communicators, really use when you're communicating your work. I think for now, everyone understands the power of media. And there's probably, I can't think of any other influential segment than the press and news media. And I think that's the reason why we call it the fourth estate, because in real terms, it has power to influence change in our society. So it is the same reason why, why I think science communicators should always create strategic relationships with the media, and not just every media, you know, because you have media organizations who have members of their press who are specialized in certain fields. And here we're talking about science journalists, because these are the people who at least try to make themselves aware of what's going on in the science world every now and then. And so I think it is important to work with people who have specializations other than just having any relationship with any media. And in short, the key tools to communicate is really knowing the what, the who, why, and when. But if we could go a little bit further, the ways to design communication, the right communication. And, you know, these tools that I'm going to, highlight here based on my interactions and experience with some of the scientists. one, we're looking at simplicity. How do you make sure that you're as concise when telling complex stories? Because that is important. And as Albert Einstein once said, if you can't explain it simply, it just means you don't understand it well enough. And I think most of you will agree with me. If you were not able to explain what COVID-19 is to your mom, for instance, in the village, I don't think you yourself understand what it is. And so it is important to be as simple when you're writing or when you're explaining your work, because that determines to what extent people will grasp what you're trying to say. So we tend to believe that concision is really a skill that doesn't only help you to communicate complex information, but it can also help you lead to solutions for some of the complex problems. I gave an example here. Probably some of you know it. Let me see if I can play it here. I hope most of us understand Kinyarwanda, our language. So I think this was the then Minister of Agriculture was asked to give explanation regarding fertilizers, and this is the way he was trying to explain.
Nyakubahwa Perezida wa Repubulika, nk'uko mubivuze ikibazo cy'intanga, gutera intanga turacyagifite muri minisiteri. Ubu icyo turimo gukora, ntangire ku kibazo cyo mwari muvuze cyo gutera intanga z'inka, icyo turimo gukora ni ukudecentralizinga system kugira ngo igere ku baturage ku buryo bushoboka, kuko n'ubundi ariko byari bikwiye kuba bimeze. Mu rwego rwa services, ubu twaramanuye intanga
you see something like this, you ask yourself, who is this person addressing really? You're a minister, you're addressing people in your villages. You're talking about liquid nitrogen. What is liquid nitrogen really? So the language you use really matters. Even the way you're trying to explain things really matters. You're talking about integrating. What is integrating? You're talking about, this is a national retreat. It's a conference where all Rwandans basically are sitting in front of that. TV stations and radios are following. And if you can't explain something in simple terms, it just means you don't understand, and people won't even understand exactly what you're trying to do. The second tool here is to try to be a storyteller. When you try to observe, you will realize that most of the scientists tend to use a lot of numbers when explaining their reports. And so many times you will realize that this really bores people when you're doing this. And so scientists should really learn how to be storytellers. Instead of starting maybe with a presentation with a bunch of numbers, start with a related story to what you're trying to present. The third tool I highlight here is to visualize stories. Instead of having plain numbers and text in your reports or presentations, try to use images, videos, graphs, and etc. And there's proof, there's some level of evidence that people tend to learn easily and quickly through visuals. So the fourth item and tool, which is the last one, is to use metaphors and analogies. When Steve Jobs first tried to explain to others what a personal computer was and how it could work, he became really frustrated because no one could understand what he was talking about. And then he learned how to use metaphors and analogies to communicate complex messages. I give an example here where Jobs described an IBM in 1984 as Big Brother come to life, basically bringing the idea to a famous television commercial that was pitting the MacBook against IBM. Jobs also once described the computer as the most remarkable tool that we have ever come up with. It's basically equivalent of a bicycle for our minds. So he was basically what Steve Jobs was trying to do was to tell a story of something that people had never seen before, but in a way that people can relate it to their life and what sort of impact that invention was trying to make. So analogies really have the power to, quickly make it click in the mind of your audience. And so, as scientists, you should, always try to use metaphors and analogies when you're, telling your stories. So I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julius. Your presentation was good and you gave us the reading information we need. Hello.
Hello, hi Agnes. Did you call me?
No, I'm calling Dorothy. She's the next one.
Okay, sorry.
Dorothy, are you around?
Yes, I'm around. I'm trying to share my screen.
Okay.
Yes, I'm around. Sorry? Not hearing you. Hello?
Hello. You can
Can you
hear
hear
it,
me?
okay. Yes, you can.
Let me give someone my screen, then he can help me. Bear with me. Let me share.
Can you send it back to me? Help to share it.
Okay, let me give it to now. Yes. Hello, Emable, can you please help me by sharing the screen?
Could you please share the, yes, I can't, let me just download and then you will be.
Okay, I can be speaking to.
So may I ask hello?
Yes.
Yes. Hello.
So I want to share via my laptop because I'm now using both. I'm connected to different platforms. Hold on a second.
Okay. Meanwhile, I'm honored to talk to you, researchers. Me, I'm a journalist. For 11 years, I have been to former Orenfall as a volunteer journalist. Now, after the volunteering in Orenfall, I came at TV1 where I worked for 6 years. In 2020 start RBA. So my name is Bawas Dorothy. I do reporting. That's my everyday work at RBA. I focus on community-based stories because I like community, I like advocacy, I like reporting at large. So when I was invited to talk to you researchers, I have seen my fellow journalists like Fulgence, I greet you. I was told to talk to you about how scientists can use the usual words. That's what we are going to talk about. I'm going to talk to you as a journalist. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a journalist who uses these community words, because when you are communicating to people, you try to talk to their language. You speak in their language. You can't come and you tell them, you know me, I'm a journalist. I use microphone, and when I get to job, I edit, I put it on computer. So you try to come down to the community. That's what I was trying to mean. So my topic is how to avoid jargon in communicating scientific information to the general public. Focus ways is scientists. We are going to see how scientists could use the word that scientists could use to motivate the public to know more about their findings. And the key points are: we are going to talk about communication in general, the importance of communication, ways and tools of communicating, and then we shall see what is jargon and the importance of using jargon. Yes, jargon, of not using jargon. Sometimes jargon it's good for the same people who know each other, who are in the same field, who are in the same job. They can use jargon between them, but it's not good to use jargons when you are communicating to the public. Let's go and we shall see the interpretation of findings, how the scientists could interpret their findings so that the community can get them. And we are going to see tips for communicating science to non-scientists. Now, communication, as it defines, it's the act of transferring information from one place, person or a group, to another. So communication can be done accordingly. Let me give you an example. Once I worked for USAID in its project that was called HEALTHEDU. HEALTHEDU used to have many campaigns in different districts. So one day we went to Rusiro district. When we reached there, we were supposed to teach them how to give children milk. So the people in Rusiro district, they were telling us, you are telling us to give our kids milk, yet we don't have cows. So we were trying to tell them, you know, milk is good for a child. It is contained, it has calcium in it. So by that time, our science people, we're trying to tell the community how milk is composed of calcium. So the community told me, because I was working in communication, I used to be behind chatting with people. So they told me, mubanze muduhe inka mubone kuza kutubwira iby'amata n'ikindi ibyo ngibyo murimo mutubwira ngo sinzi ibyo murimo muvuga ngo amata ngo calcium ni iki, tuzi ko calcium ari umuti. Those were old people because they know calcium as a medicine. So when we are communicating to people, we try to calm down, we try to know how they behave. Yes. Let me give you another example, like environmental scientists. They come and say, you know, like this word that is called biodiversity. When you tell community biodiversity, they don't know what biodiversity means. But if you come and say, you know, our trees, our flowers, our plants should be more protected, there the community can get you. Okay, so let's see the importance of communication. In our daily interaction, communication plays an important role in making interaction faster, for making life easier. We need to communicate in the fastest way. When you want to say something, you hit the point. You hit the point, you know. You can tell people, tomorrow we are going at market, tomorrow we are going to have COVID test to boost our immunity. So people there, they can't get you. They don't know how the vaccine can boost the immunity. But if you tell them, please go for the vaccination, and that vaccine is important to you, and it will prevent you the COVID-19. So another thing is, here is a tool of communication. I just tried to use the microphone because it's my everyday tool, and that's what I use every day. That's just because I'm a journalist, and that's why I chose this microphone. But there are many ways of communicating to people. You can either write, you can either send messages, you can either use emails, as my brothers have been saying. You try to use many ways, many tools to communicate. Okay, calm down a bit on that brain picture, Yes, come back on the brain picture. Brain. No, you are going faster. Yes, there. So that's what I have been telling you on the capacity of thinking of people. You can't tell me that people in Nyagatare district, maybe whom the community of Nyagatare district, you cannot go there and start telling them, you know, when you grow Irish potato, I mean that one in the farms, that one who grazes cows, you can't go there with such information. So you first know the culture, the capacity of thinking, you know the norms, how people knows something. So you have to first check on how people knows something that you're going to communicate to them. Come bring those 3 people after the brain. Okay. No, you're going faster. No, first go down. Oops.
You want me to go up?
Yes, go up. Go up.
Again?
Up. Yes, there. So,
This is the top. Yes, page.
Please go on the second picture.
Sorry,
Go on the third picture.
can I go down?
Yes, go down. Go down a bit. Yes, go.
The brain is here.
Next. After these people. After this picture, after the third picture, down.
Hello?
After the third picture, Imable,
After the
go down a bit. Yes, go down.
This
Yes,
one?
there.
Okay.
Imable. Where is, go after the people, the third picture. Go up, go up, go up, up.
Yes.
Yes, we are coming on how to avoid jargons on scientific information to the general public. First of all, we see what is jargon. Jargons are special words or expression that are used by a professional or a group of people that are difficult for others to understand. So let's get an example. In this case of COVID-19, one person from RBC came on radio. He was just explaining how PCR test is taking place. So he started his, let me call it a speech. He started his speech, you know, we are testing COVID-19, but by that time they were doing mass test, COVID mass test. They were testing by PCR test. So that person came and he started saying, now we are starting testing people by PCR, and people are just escaping it. And let me try to put in Kinyarwanda. So he came and said, ubu ngubu turimo gutanga urukingo rwa PCR ni ukugira ngo turebe abantu ko barimo kwandura, turagira ngo tumenye uko ubwandu buhagaze kugira ngo dukore izindi ngamba zishobora gutuma abantu birinda COVID-19. So urumva, he tries to give a message, but that word, that small word in between, that is called PCR. The general public, or not the general, some people who didn't go to school couldn't know that it's an oral test, just oral test. So I have tried to give another example. Here in Rwanda, when we are trying to communicate between us like journalists, when you are going to do the stories about people with disabilities, you can hear someone in the newsroom saying, uyu munsi ndakorera mu bapewede. So when I say uyu munsi ndakorera mu bapewede, someone who is not a journalist, someone who is not a participant in that newsroom, he cannot understand what is pewede means. Yet it's people with disabilities. So it's good to use these normal words that are not jargon. So the importance of not using jargon, I have tried to explain it. So jargons risk confusion to the audience. Now we go to the ways scientists could use to motivate the public to know very well on their findings. Communicating science information, stop there, yes. Communicating science information to the non-scientists it's both easy and not easy as well. How easy it is? When you use that kind of mathematics, that kind of percentages, it's easy for you who are communicating to communicate faster, but it's not easy for the general public who are trying to get something in that finding. One of the things that shows understanding science, it's when I'm able to effectively communicate what they know, and that's what I have been. When you're communicating to your fellow scientists, it's easy. But when you're telling me about findings and you are using some kind of mathematics, it's not very easy. No, for example, let me give you this example. A research carried out a particular sector showed that 57% of men love their wives so much. So break down the percentage to number, everyone that can use or can understand. So here, when you're communicating numbers, you need to be specific. You don't need to be more scientific. So you can say like this: the sector has 240 married men. Among these, 137, which is equivalent to 57, love their wives so much. So, first you have said 57% among 100% love their wives so much. But when you try to mean these 137% equals to 57%, there a muturage from Nyabihu or Nyabimataka can understand. And most people understand 1/2. That's half. When you meet someone, you can say, "How are you?" And he says, "It's 50-50. 50-50 means a half." So a half, it came just easier. It came very fast for the community to understand. So you have to work out your figures and express them in a countable figure to your audience that doesn't know mathematical expression, and you use comparison or analogy, like what Julius have been telling to you. So go down a bit. Okay, here there is another. Oh yeah, down. Ziraho hejuru gato. No, garura ibyo utwaye hejuru. Go up. Yes, go up. Go up. Continue going up. Yes. Gato. Yes. Okay. Another example. Let me give you another example, which is relevant. If, for example, Nyiragongo volcano erupted and its magma at the volume of 20,000 meter cubes flowed at speed of 40 miles per hour and devastated 10% of the city, then here you can use a comparison to express it. When I'm talking about this, someone who doesn't know mathematics, it's hard for him or her to get it well. So me as a journalist, when you tell me this one in interview, I can't get anything. I can ask you another thing that is relevant to this. I can use this. I can ask you as a journalist. So what is size of dam that this 20,000 meter cube can feel, so that I can I can get a comparison. Me as a journalist, because some of us we are not good in mathematics. Now, I can also give you an example, because I have heard that there is a Rift Valley that is widening between Rwanda and DR Congo at millimeters. So when a journalist are expressing such speed to the public, we use the speed at which a fingernail grows in a certain period, roughly a month, such as comparison, to help people to understand. So for us, we try to bring that example to show people that when the volcano erupted, it created a dam between DR Congo and Rwanda. And we give them the quantity of magma that formed that dam. So we need to give some relevant information. We go. No audience, yes? If you are a scientist talking to the lawyers, use an example or examples of things that a lawyer is likely to see in daily activity. Find some examples. Maybe you can talk to the lawyer, asking him how he's going to punish the suspect. So law itself, it is explanatory, but a science to the law, it's it's two things different. So we need to come down and explain more about science. And we find a relatable stories to understand and more engaging that form of science communication. So when you are representing findings, you need some feedback from the people whom you are presenting the findings to. That's when I use this picture. People may give you feedback, ideas, inputs. They can comment. So every day we need some comments from our audience. We need to know what is from our audience. You know, in journalism, when we are doing some stories, after doing the story, we put it on Twitter to see what is the community saying about this story. Here, I have tried to bring the website that can help you. Maybe you have written a text that is going to be presented to the community. You can use this website to see how common your words in that text are, to see how normal words are, to see how jargons are in these words. So, and you do some background to know what you have written, to know if it is going to be understood by the community. And it's good for a researcher. It's good to research about the topic that you're representing. Yes, that's what I have been telling you. You need to do some researches that can give you an impression of what terms the public uses to refer the scientific term. So when you are going to one of our districts, maybe you are going to Gisenyi. Gisenyi, we know they mix languages. They mix Swahili, they mix French, they mix Lingala, so they have different terms. Gisenyi is different from maybe Bugesera. You cannot hear someone from Bugesera mixing Swahili and French. And for the Gisenyi people, it's their usual languages. They mix. In Kinyarwanda, we call them Indimishan. And when you go to Gicumbi, you can find some people who are mixing Runyankore and Kinyarwanda. There is one place where I went in 2016, and I gave them like an exam to read the national anthem. They couldn't do it because they speak Ruchiga. They don't know how to sing. Rwanda nziza gihugu cyacu. They use that languages of Uganda. So we need to know some slang, some languages, some capacity of thinking. So when we are presenting our files, we need to calm down and be like, these people, whom are we going to talk to? So we don't need to create an island between us and the community. So I think that is it. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to ask if you have some questions. If there are people with questions, you can please either raise your hand or you can type in the chat. Meanwhile, I want to ask if Emabli is still there. Emabli, are you there?
Yes, I am.
We are here. So
all right.
On my side,
okay.
When someone is not comfortable in English, she can maybe use Kinyarwanda, because me, I'm not someone who is binded by languages. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so if there is anyone who is willing to ask a question in Kinyarwanda, you can ask, or in English.
Yeah, sure.
Feel free. So you can raise your hand. Emab, do you have something to add?
Okay, just one of the key points I would like to highlight. Just there are some science communication essentials. The most important from our level, just there is one take-home message. The take-home message just focus on the big impact whatever we communicate, because most of my colleagues here have already highlighted, have shed on light on that. But the most focus just to focus on bigger impacts, just to relate to your research to the bigger picture. Why this is research important? I think that's very, very important as far as when you communicate science. Because, you know, as the way you communicate, because the science journalist, sometimes when you come to the editor, you need to pitch to the editor. There's what's so-called the elevator pitch. I'm very sure that this applies the same way for the scientific communities. Though just if something helps you are now pitching to the public. You are helping the value of your research. How are you helping someone to understand the value of that? You need to explain when your research is exciting and relevant. What kind of problem are you trying to solve? That's some key points in scientific community. And when you come across to communicate science, when you come to communicate science, what problem are you trying to solve? That's something that will make exciting and relevant to the general public. I think that's very important. I need to highlight. Maybe that's where you can just start discussing the conversation. Of course, because this session is a knowledge sharing session. We need to hear what scientific community think about how to communicate, what is missing, what are kind of challenge. That's something we need to hear from them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Julius, do you have something to add? Julius, if you can hear.
Yes, I can hear you. Jedi, no, really. I think the bottom line is, most of the speakers have spoken so much about, you know, the overview of what science communicators really need to know. But I think the bottom line is that you, at the end of the day, you need to identify exactly what you're looking for when you're, you know, writing. If you say it's the kind of research that you're making, you need to know who exactly, even before you begin to make a research, you ask yourself really, who am I targeting in this research? Who's going to read this research? Why am I even doing it? You know, obviously those are questions you ask as part of your scientific research, but in terms of making sure that really your research makes an impact, you really need to know the what, the who, the why, and those are the very basic things in communication. So I won't add so much, but I think that is the bottom line for me.
Thank you very much. There is a question in the chat. Someone called Pierre is asking, which techniques, strategy should be used to communicate to the community, not ignoring that the general public is a mixture with scientists and non-scientists? Can you?
I can
Okay.
say something on
Please,
this.
please go ahead.
Yes. Let me tell you something. When like we journalists, when we are doing hard stories, like the stories that are telling about science, economics, we talk to these people in the Kigali city, the educated people. But when it comes for the social stories, we know we can get that story everywhere. So like this one, when you go to communicate the science information to the general public, it depends where you are.
Excuse me, Dorothy, we cannot hear you very well.
I can hear you, Emab. Can you hear me now? Yes?
Hello, Dorothy is still around?
Yes, I'm around.
Yes.
I'm around.
Dorothy is speaking. Yeah, Dorothy, I can
Yes.
hear you. Maybe
speaking.
Emab, you can check if there is any problem on your side.
Now it's fine.
All right. Okay, Dorothy, you can go ahead.
What I'm trying to mean, maybe you've gone to maybe you're going to Nyaruguru district to talk to the people in Nyabimata sector. There we know that there are headmasters, doctors, students. There is even unemployed people who live there. But when it is about the community, maybe it is what we call inteko y'abaturage in the evening on Tuesday. Now you are going to communicate the findings which you got from the research. From there, I can't say you ignore the scientists, but the majority, that's the majority, it counts. You just communicate, ignoring that there is educated people here. But when it comes to go to the schools, the universities, you can even communicate in a scientific way, and you mix a little bit because you've gone to educated people or educated community. That's what I can say on that question.
Thank you very much. There is another question, probably addressed to Emab. Someone is asking.
Yeah.
Emab, have you seen it in the chat?
Yes, I've seen the question. Actually, he's asking this, there is a subtitle on the 15th slide where I state that what's interesting you is also interesting. When I say you, it's scientists. It's also interesting others. Others is public. So when he asks, is this a principle? Yes, it is a principle actually. When it comes to communicate science, if not, yes, it is a principle already. So I would also emphasize that when it comes actually, for scientific community, researchers are most interested on quantitative, as I said in my presentation, and qualitative analysis, which is actually good for them, but the way they pursue data collection, analysis, and interpretation, that's enough for the scientists. But when I say what is interesting to you is also interesting to others. So could you also try to simplify your jargon as as my colleagues, my sister Doris was explaining now, to simplify your jargon, to explain exactly what is beyond that. Can you please try to simplify your message, to simplify the jargon? With the way, because also the public would be interested to know how you pursue your data collection, your analysis, your interpretation. Also may be interesting to the public to know exactly that's how they will be judging if your findings are really accurate and reliable. I think I'm not sure if I have answered your question.
Okay, then Emab, the second part of the question was, if you know that your findings are going to irritate them, if you are sure that your findings are going to irritate them, now how will you do that?
If you are sure, I cannot.
No, the question is, what can be considered when you know exactly that the audience might be irritated by your findings?
Yes. Okay. Actually, I have already mentioned some key steps. You know, the first important, you have to identify your objective. You need to start with the most important information. That's something you have already, some of my colleagues have already talked about that. You need to know when to use jargon, because you know, when you are just getting your message across to someone who will never know exactly what it's about, of course he'll be irritated because, you know, he doesn't understand what it's about. You know when to use jargon. You need to use the narratives. Narratives, that's very important. When you have to tell the story, you need to use you also to use the balance of visual and text. That's something I've already. Of course, you can also talk about scientific process. Just don't focus on results itself. Also talk about scientific process. How did you come to reach out to how did you come to this conclusion? Also need to focus on the bigger impact. What will be the impact? So as I said earlier, the major focus of any other scientific communication, you need to show the impact of your research. When your impact is not visible, it's not really, you are not telling the impact of your research. That means that's the communication that will not go across. I think I've answered your question. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now there is now in case, for example, for us healthcare providers, we're dealing with most of the time with patients. Now, if I would like to ask, sometimes healthcare providers deliver ESA, what we call information, education, and communication, specifically before the clinics in the morning to the audience. Now, with COVID, the situation has changed, and people had to really find innovative ways to deliver these kind of shows. Now, do you think there are some, I would like to ask this to Julius, if he's around. Do you think there are some information that you better not tell? Julius, are there some information that you cannot deliver, that you can keep for yourself, probably?
Sorry, I didn't get the context of the question. Do you mind repeating again?
Let me come back to it. Yeah, for healthcare providers, normally in different hospital and center and health facilities in general, they organize education in the morning for patients, and they deliver some information about diseases, how to prevent, how to take care of themselves. And now with COVID, they have to deliver information on stopping the spread. I would like to ask you, as a journalist, is there any case where you have to maybe keep information for yourself and not say it? Maybe, for example, I don't know. Are there some information that you think would be a little bit confidential that you cannot deliver?
I think one of the things that we tend to do, obviously, which I think is also a principle in healthcare. First of all, information that is, or that might.
Julius, please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying there's an understanding, especially when it comes to information. First of all, information that is not agreed upon by so many people. Let's say the pandemic, the new strain of Omicron, right? Right now, there's so many versions of what the evolution of Omicron is. So it is not advisable until it is proven that this is the evolution of this disease. It is not really advisable to go around telling people that, hey, there's this new variant which is extreme, because what that does to the people is that people are going to be anxious. People may even sometimes take decisions that they've never planned to take simply because of fear and so on. So you weigh as a person, you weigh, you put on the weigh and say, okay, is this a kind of information that is probably likely to cause alarm? If that is the case, then you decide not to say that information, or even information that is, either likely to affect one patient or another. And I'll give you an example. For instance, I think back in when the pandemics, when COVID-19 hit in Ukraine, the first bus that carried people from China to Ukraine, people were literally threatened, people who came from China, because everyone, the community were like, no, these are the people bringing COVID-19, because the understanding around the pandemic at the time was that the media had portrayed China as a hotspot of a deadly pandemic that people could not live with anywhere in the world. And so it's really important to put on the, to weigh your options and say, how is information going to be received by people? Is it likely to threaten people? You basically put on the weigh. I think pretty much is it's all about knowing the audience. But if, let's say, you're addressing people who are educated, maybe university students, I think it's okay to tell them, hey, listen, there's this pandemic called, there's this new strain called Omicron, and there's an understanding that it is likely to be deadly or to spread faster than any other strain we've seen before, because then you're talking to people who, to some extent, really understand beyond the ordinary information around. So I'm not sure if I've answered the question, but
yeah, thank you very much, Leah. Yeah, you've
Can I
answered.
add something?
Dorothy, you can add, please. Dorothy,
Yes,
go ahead.
let me give you a simple example. When COVID pandemic came to Rwanda, for the first time, we are not sure what is COVID. And we knew that Kanyinya and Nyarugenge were the two hospitals that were receiving the COVID patients, but almost district hospitals had the quarantine where they were receiving patients of COVID-19. So as a doctor, you couldn't wake up in the morning and go and you communicate some patients around and you tell them, hey, please do not shout, here we have COVID positive patients. That's the confidential information to the health workers. So there should be some confidentiality that couldn't be communicated to the public.
right, all right, now, okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else with a question? Otherwise, if there is anyone who can raise the hand, we can give you the floor to ask a question. Otherwise, if you are okay, we are going to share, we're going to request the presenters to give us the PowerPoints, and then we're going to email to you the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, or we can put them on our website application, and then you will be able to access them. Okay, let me ask for the last time, is there anyone with a question? Aimable, do you need to add something?
It's okay.
right.
It's okay. No.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And okay, so if there is no any other question, let me join with the whole team of Health-Edu and the project in general that you're implementing. So we thank very much the participants. And okay, Alexandre, do you have a question? All right. So we thank very much the presenters, Aimable, Julius, and Dorothy. Thank you very much for taking the time to prepare and taking the time as well to present. And this is going to be helpful for healthcare providers in general. It's going to help them in delivering, conveying information to either the public or in scientific presentations for the research findings. And more specifically in this period where we are all joining hands to fight COVID-19, we hope that it's going to help healthcare providers in general, and some of them who are going to follow this online will be helped. So we appreciate and we thank you very much for your time, and we come to the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.